Welcome to the Indian Silicon Valley podcast. I'm your host Jivraj, and on this podcast, I have some amazing conversations with founders, investors, and thought leaders from across the Indian startup ecosystem. Today, I am joined by the extremely passionate and articulate gentleman, Anand Anandkumar, the founder and CEO of Bugworks. Bugworks is a drug research company that's trying to fight superbugs and create an antibiotic for it. In the effort to do the almost impossible, Anand has championed the cause of biotech, health tech, and deep tech in the country and is leading the innovation from our country. However, what I like the most about this episode is how candid we were, yet how amazingly we've been able to bring up the fundamental insights to being a founder. From discussing the motivations to starting up, to discussing the privilege aspect of entrepreneurship and how privilege actually leads our motivation, to understanding the opportunity you and I have in front of us today and the kind of impact we can create. Anand mentions through the episode that we will be measured by the amount of impact we create, the value we generate for others, and the amount of lives we touch. And that is such an amazing thought. I am extremely excited to present this episode to you, and I hope that you enjoy the episode as much as I did. So, without further ado, let's jump in.
Without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Anand Anandkumar of Bugworks on the show. Thank you so much, Anand, for joining me. It's such a pleasure for me to be able to host you.
Thank you so much, Jivraj. Always pleasure to meet young, bubbly talent like you, and I'm looking forward to a conversation.
Same here, and I'm absolutely privileged to be sitting across such a stalwart from the industry because you've not just done things in the scope of entrepreneurship, you're working towards a cause which is a greater purpose and solves such a huge problem that is so existential in nature. So before we start and dwell into greater concepts of entrepreneurship, your journey and biotechnology, I'd like
Yeah,
to present a question which is at the forefront of entrepreneurship, and I'd love your opinion on it because from what I could
sure.
gather from my research, it was really great. So I'd love to know from you what you think of wealth in the context of entrepreneurship, and how important is it to start off with the right reasons when you tread on this pathway and not look at starting up as a means to gaining wealth or getting rich, because I'm sure you have some great opinions there, and I'd love it if you can give us and set the right context for starting up in this question.
You've asked the toughest question right up front. I really appreciate that, Jivraj. Had you asked me this question when I was in my 30s, I think that my answer would have been very different than I'm now. So I must tell your audience, I'm a 50 something person. So it's my experiences that have taught me to understand this question. So there's no right or wrong answer. I'll just share what I think about you. Wealth can never be the reason why you start a company because, we've as cliched and boring as that sounds, it's absolutely true, Jivraj. I've never met a successful entrepreneur who sat with me and said, "Wow, I made money." I always hear them saying that we cracked this problem. We changed society's outlook on something. We created an aggregation model that never existed before. We did a drug discovery that's going to save tens of thousands of lives, right? Or we did an IT services that was never thought of before. These are the reasons when I sit down with these entrepreneurs, and I've sat down with hundreds of them. The right reason, choose the right reason to why you want to do a startup. It's not just a career, it's a mission. Big difference between doing something because it's so mission and vision orientated as opposed to just being career. If you do a good job in your startup, automatically your career will be great and automatically you'll make money. So money is important, but it comes as a consequence of having created a successful enterprise. You can't go in thinking money because it colors, it completely occludes your thinking and the decisions you will make, the ethics that you may follow as a startup, as an entrepreneur, make it compromised if the driving force is money. Of course, as a youngster, I used to look at my stock options and think, is it going to be worth something? Those are fair questions, fair insecurities, fair expectations. But that's not the reason why you do a startup. Go after something that is going to make a difference to somebody's life, to the environment, or is going to, as I tell my folks, do something that changes a small patch of garden even. If the work I do, you know, changes a small patch of land and makes it greener, that's a good reason for me to want to do something. Byproduct of that is wealth, fame, etc., not the other way around.
Fair enough, fair enough. I'm glad that we could get that on the record because I think that's a very fundamental differentiation and a
Yes,
very fundamental thing to understand before we set out on this journey. And now that
sure.
we are on journeys, I'd love for you to perhaps give us an overview of not just your journey, but the eventful things that have happened as a consequence of the decisions that you were bold enough to take. Because from what I could gather, you didn't have to do a lot of the things that you did end up doing. You were motivated enough to, right? And
Yes,
that motivation and that decision making power and that learnability from going to from chips to biosciences to life sciences has been
sure.
tremendous. So it'll be great. I'll leave the floor to you, but it'll be great if you can give us insights to what motivated you to take those decisions and also walk us through
Sure.
the decisions and the
Excellent.
journey.
Excellent. Finally, our all of our journeys, Jivraj and our listeners here, are just a composite collection of the decisions we make, right? Which is why your parents often tell you, please take the right decision of friends, everything, the right decision of choice of college you go to, etc. Finally, it's all about decisions. And we take some right, we take some wrong, all of us, and we learn through that process. Nobody is so clairvoyant as to take all the right decisions. So, ladies and gentlemen, my journey began in the 1980s as a young engineering graduate student of Anna University in Chennai, which is the oldest university system in our country. I did electronics, went to the United States, like most people of my generation did, to do a master's and stayed on to do a PhD. Uh, the first choice I did was to continue doing a PhD instead of taking up a job. And I have to thank my wife for that. I met her as a graduate student and she convinced me to stay on. And guys, I took that decision based on love, and that worked out beautifully in my life. And I stayed on to finish a PhD and worked in the electronics chip design area. But I was always fascinated by biology, and I came from a family that is filled with doctors. My father worked for 53 years as a physician in government service before he passed away. My family attended to the first HIV/AIDS patient in 1983. So this in subconscious, I always had biology. I was good in biology, but I took engineering. So my PhD was in electrical and biomedical engineering. So that was a choice again to say, I like biology, but the jobs are not there in biology. Let me do a job in chip design, but let me leave the door open for biology. And I believed in that thing that no study is waste because you can't say, I'm going to do all of this because I'm going to get a job. I'm only going to take these data sciences courses because it's going to give me an extra 10K salary. No way. No way. Whatever you're interested in, study and make it a lifelong journey. At 55, I wake up in the morning now, even taking courses online. So you're not done with your studies, Jivraj, and your audience. Right? So I did my PhD, worked in the United States, first in Washington and then in Silicon Valley, and then came back to India. Again, a choice. When I was 35, somebody believed in me and said, move to India to start the India operation of a US company in computer chip design area. They believed in me. I had no experience of working in India. And I said, I think the writing is clear on the wall. India is going to happen. 2000, still we're taking off. IT had already happened, but biotechnology had not happened, and all the other things had not happened. Even my parents thought I was taking a wrong decision to give up a comfortable life in Silicon Valley, where I would have become a vice president of some company and moved here. Kids were really small. We took a decision, and now it's been 21 years since we moved back. Decision again, right? So sometimes, you get lucky with those decisions, but a lot of time you have to look at the big picture and say, where am I going to be in 5 years? Where is this country moving towards? And take your decisions based on that. Believe in your gut. You're not right always. But when you look at the macro picture, in 2000, I said, I can be in the United States and have a comfortable life like all my friends. Nothing wrong with that. Or be in India when it's just happening through all the bumpy roads, unexplored roads, no roads, and become part of laying the foundation for an ecosystem as opposed to comfortably sitting in Silicon Valley or New York. No right or wrong in any of these things. One should never be judgmental. Just follow your dil, right? And my dil said, be in India, you're in India, you can give back to India. I did two startup companies, Jivraj, in electronics. I just ran India and China for US companies that got acquired. And then in 2007, 8, I switched from semiconductor to biotech. I think my internal call of wanting to do something for healthcare was completely brought out because I had two health challenges in my own life. Both of them could have knocked me off. I would have been dead and gone, and I survived it. First one happened in the early 2000s, second one happened around 2005, 2006. And I told myself choices. I said, Anand, not once but twice you came close to death and you came out. Wow, you are one hell of a lucky guy. Shouldn't your life be extraordinary? Shouldn't your life be about healthcare? You may not have much of a time left because the science showed up to you. Just get out of your comfort zone and do something that can shake up society and make a big difference. That was the guiding light, and I followed that guiding light, right? And I said, told myself, I'm going to get into this. At mid 40s, started studying biochemistry, molecular biology, oncology biology, and co-founded a company called Cellworks, which is still running. And Jivraj, today it's one of the largest companies in the world that uses mathematical modeling and engineering techniques to simulate human cancer so that the oncologist can visualize the tumor and understand her particular patient's tumor background and customize treatment for the patient. That's what Cellworks does. While I was in Cellworks, coming to the last part of my journey, I said too many people are dying with infection. I was worried about pandemics in early 2010, even before the word pandemic was, well
Mhm.
understood like it is today. Said India loses 2 lakh people per year, every year, to superbugs. These are bacterial infection in our hospitals, in our communities, where you go to the hospital, do a surgery is successful, but you pick up an infection, antibiotics don't work. That's called a superbug. 200,000 people, out of which 60 to 70,000 are babies who die before the age of 21. I said, how come such large death? No big pharmaceutical companies are working in this space because it is a poor country problem. COVID 19 has shaken that narrative to where more people are dying in the West than are dying in poorer countries. But bacterial issues were long forgotten, Jivraj, because they were considered to be India's problem or China's problem. So I said, wake up, wake up. Let's do a company that is going to come out with a new antibiotic, never done since the 1960s, from India for the world. And that's how Bugworks happened. So it's so important, ladies and gentlemen, even at age 21, 22, your generation is much ahead of the previous generation. Please be in tune with that inner calling because your generation doesn't need to worry about dal chawal. Your parents had to worry about dal chawal, and we were all having that middle class insecurities. You guys are doing what you're doing today because you've come out of that middle class insecurity thanks to your parents, thanks to the platforms created in this country. When such a platform is given to you, it's not about mean survival and just return. It's about doing things that are extraordinary. So you will do it much earlier than I did it. So join me in that fascinating journey.
For sure, for sure. I mean, that is a spectacular journey bundled up in a couple of minutes and goes to show. I mean, my takeaways from that is that, like you have to be patient enough. Like you cannot do everything at once. And it is not like the world is going away. If you truly want to solve a problem, you will be eventually.
Correct.
And there are great moments lying for you, and you have to take the onus. I mean, if you would have waited for somebody else to have solved that problem, nobody would have done that. You have to take it
That's right.
upon you to have solved it. Uh, there's an
Sorry,
interesting.
Shivraj, you made a so sorry to come in. You made a
Sure.
very interesting point, and all of us should be thankful to the families that supported us, right? So behind all of our journeys, these journeys are meaningless if I didn't have the supportive spouse, supportive children, supportive investors. So it takes an entire village to create your startup idea. You are just one. So when someone says, Anand, you've done a great job, I actually feel shy because honestly, I'm just a small portion of a larger ecosystem. Sure, I'm an evangelist and I lend a voice and a credible background to a cause, but I'm just one piece of a complex ecosystem. So I'm deeply thankful to that ecosystem that allowed me to be here.
For sure. Again, like there are some great pointers that you keep mentioning. The gratitude factor is also there. And, a segue from there is this is an interesting question. I love your opinion on this.
Sure.
I want to talk about the paradox of privilege, right? So, this from where I come from, right? There are things that if you're privileged, there are things that you don't take notice of. And as you mentioned, that you observed the problem and that you personally felt, right? And that continuously happens. So what do you think of being able to, either A, exploit privilege, or B, deeply feel the problem that you're actually going to start and solve for a higher purpose? So do you have any thoughts on that?
Excellent. Wow. Your questions below your age, Jivraj. These are tough questions, no easy answers. Like I said, privilege, the definition of privilege for me and you may again be different. For me, being born into a middle class family, the fact that I had a roof over my head and I could take a bus to school and college, I was privileged already. Today, somebody may say I need to already have a 2 lakh salary by the time I'm 26 and then consider themselves to be privileged. So each generation changes its definition. I was certainly privileged. I went to a wonderful school called Don Bosco in Chennai. I went to a great college, etc. So throughout life, I was taught because my father came from government service that we need to give back to society, and I came from the medical background. And I'm not trying to say that that is the right thing. Remember, no judgments. It all depends on how you take something. Now, for your young generation, your audience, so let's be very direct. I want to repeat the point. You're one of the most privileged generations this country has seen. We don't know how India was before the British came. We know we had 20% of the wealth, and thanks to colonization, that wealth came down to 0.2%, as Sashita so beautifully spoke about. We don't know how that India was. But we know how this India was after independence, our insecurities. We were completely smashed and we're just coming out and we're just 75 years old. Our country is rebooting now. That rebooting is happening with your generation, right? Suddenly, the juxtaposition of data, juxtaposition of engineering, juxtaposition of medicine, everything is available. You guys come from a great background of education. You didn't have to worry about putting food on the table. So suddenly your generation is already privileged by the time they're 20 and 21. And you have one of two things to do with that privilege. Either you can continue on the privilege axis and keep complaining about everything around you is not good enough to feed your privilege, or you can say, holy cow, a country of 1.35 billion, Jivraj, 300 million still go to sleep on an empty stomach in our country. We have the highest death rate, one of the highest death rate among young babies that are born. It's called neonatal death. When newborn babies, neonatal death. We still have a hunger problem. We have an environment problem, as all of you know. Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, these cities stand in the top 10 in the world in terms of pollution. So you can sit back and say, I love my privileged life and I'm going to do things that keep on feeding that privilege. Nothing wrong, but you won't have an extraordinary life. Or you can say, I'm so freaking privileged. Let it not just be about my dal chawal. I can use my position of privilege to do things and create an extraordinary life. So the most important question that you ask that begets another question is, do you want an extraordinary life? And if you want an extraordinary life, whoever you speak to, whether it's Sadhguru or your father or any other entrepreneur, tell you, to have an extraordinary life, you should try to do extraordinary things. And those extraordinary things that show up in your generation now, can I do anything about poverty? Can I do anything about hunger? Can I do anything about educating people in rural areas who don't have access to Byju's and Coursera? Can I do anything about healthcare to add into the primary healthcare system to do it, right? Or can I do anything about Khana that changes the agricultural infrastructure of the country? It's like, holy cow, wow. Whereas when I was your age, Jivraj, I promise you I couldn't even think like this because I was thinking, I need to finish my master's, I need to get a job, I need to get married, I need to have children, I need to buy my apartment, I need to buy my car, I have to get my green card in the United States, I have to get my citizenship. Again, no right or wrong. That generation was all about getting set in life. You guys coming out of the gate, look at your body language. I never had your body language when I was your age. It's full of confidence. And I appreciate that is the 2.0 of India. You guys are the 2.0 of India. Uh, you know, so use that position of strength to do extraordinary things because otherwise, when you reach your 40s, I see 40 somethings who have a ton of money who feel useless with their life. And then they say, I wish my dad didn't give me all that money.
Yeah.
And I'll finish off my answer with something, right? If you look at Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or any of these guys who are sitting on 30, 40, $50 billion, they never give all the wealth to the family. And when they're always asked, why are you so parsimonious when you give this wealth? You're giving it for malaria, HIV, AIDS, Parkinson's, but you give so little to children. They say, we don't want to deny our children of a fascinating journey of life. Sometimes I think if I was born to a very rich family and had all the money I wanted when I was 21, would I have taken all the risk I did? Would I have tried all these amazing things and brought great people together to solve big problems of humanity? Which, if I solve it long after my time, millions of lives will be saved around the world with the work that I have played a small role in. What an extraordinary life is. And to your last question, in that question, today's definition of wealth is not bank balance, mutual funds, size of your house. Today's definition of wealth in your generation, by the time you and your listeners hit 30, will be like the number of lives impacted by Jivraj, the environment around you impacted by Jivraj will become a measure of your wealth. And then when you're sitting with your friends in a nice coffee house and you say that work I did made this difference, you will get the high fives as opposed to someone who says, guys, I have 10 lakhs in the bank. Major change. Definition of wealth is make money. Nice to have a comfortable life, right? As Swami Vivekananda said, you cannot teach Vedanta to a hungry stomach. So make money, etc. But that is just, it's like getting up in the morning, you have to have a bath, your body has to be clean, your mind has to be clean, you like good clothes, move on. It's just that.
This is spectacular to hear, and you mentioned some very, very key pointers, and I'm sure this is going to reinforce a lot of the fundamental beliefs that have been read and spoken about, but need to be practiced even further as a fundamental principle in life as we move forward, especially for our generation, because we need to start exploiting privilege in the right sense of it as opposed to in the wrong sense of it. So, wonderfully put, and thank you for that, Anand. And I know we've gone a bit haywire in terms of what we wanted to speak about,
Doesn't
but
matter. There's nothing haywire. That's why it's a journey, right? It's okay.
for sure, for sure. But I'd love for you to perhaps give us context to also the biotech market of India, right? And not to put it in a very traditional sense, from what I could gather through my research, right? And here's also a paradox that I could not make too much sense out of, and I'd love your opinion. India spends almost 3.5% of its GDP on healthcare, right? Whereas the average should be somewhere north of 8%. Whereas the global biotech startup market in India is still thriving in comparison, right? It comprises of a low percentage as of now, but it's expected to go on to almost 19-20% by 2025, right? So on one side we see, let's say, a startup movement booming, but on the other side the expense on healthcare is still not as much, right? So if probably I've given that context, and I'd love it if you can perhaps clarify a lot of things there and give us a brief
Sure,
overview of the life sciences biotech healthcare market of the country.
sure. And I'll keep it at a high level so I don't keep it boring, etc.
For sure.
Biotechnology is anyone using biological sciences, typically biology and chemistry, to solve problems in agriculture, environment, healthcare. These are the broad areas, right? So biotech is not just confined to healthcare. I happen to be working in health. I know people who are creating new seeds that will make better khana even in drought, or a seed that can be alive even in a flood. That's biotech. Some people are trying to figure out how to clean the air of bad pollutants using biological organisms. So anything that is at the intersection of biology, chemistry, and solving problems for society can be called biotech. Within biotech, there's healthcare, there is agro-tech, there is manufacturing, there is industrial biotech, etc., etc. And you were so correct. Despite very little spending on biotech, India is going to become a powerhouse. It's an exciting time, more exciting than when I entered biotech. The reason why biotech has started thriving in India is the following reason. The government, actually, in the last 10 years, Jivraj, has spent a lot of money creating incubators, like the one I'm sitting in Bangalore called CCAM, Center for Cellular and Molecular Platforms. There are about 12 incubators where you don't even need equipment. The labs are provided to you. You pay a healthy fee, and you just go in with your ideas and a small team, and you have no capital assets. So these beautiful centers of excellence have come out all over the country, including tier two cities, thanks to Department of Biotechnology. Point one. Point two, tens of crores, hundreds of crores of grant money have been given because biotech, compared to tech, needs 7 to 10 years. 95% of companies in biotech will fail. So for that 5% of companies, 4 to 5% that survive, they need 7 to 10 years. So you need patient capital, you need somebody willing to give the infrastructure and trust in you. So the government has done all of those things. What is missing in the biotech is private capital is still very slow coming into India. Because when you have the Zomatos and the Swiggies and all these wonderful return on investments going on, why should a private investor put money in an esoteric, hard to understand area like superbug research or diabetic research? So private investment has been slow to come in. Despite that, because of the ingenuity of this sector, we are growing. I think we are about 35, $40 billion now. By 2025, we could become 120 billion. So this is a fast rate of growth. So excellent ecosystem. And young listeners, please appreciate that you are a lucky generation because never before in the history of mankind have engineering, biology, and data sciences come together the way are coming now. So you could be a data scientist and you can get into biotech. You could be a hardcore biologist and get into biotech. You could be an engineering student who is doing a biomedical devices and get into biotech. And India proved itself through COVID-19. We didn't know what a PPE was. We didn't know what a ventilator was, most of us, when last February happened and March happened when the Honorable Prime Minister announced a shutdown. Within 2 months, ladies and gentlemen, from 15th March to 15th June, we went from knowing what we didn't know what a PPE and a ventilator was to where in 60 days we had a surplus that we were exporting to Myanmar, to Vietnam, to other countries. The resilience of India, with minimal support from government, as long as there's an overall pride, nationalistic pride, but minimal support from the government, rather minimal interference to the government, we created ventilators, we created PPs, we started creating pulse oximeters. Amazing. Now let's talk about the other side. You are absolutely correct. We spend way too little on healthcare. To be honest with you, our numbers are 1.2% of GDP. And the Honorable Finance Minister this past Monday, yes, the 1st of February, when the budget was announced, has said that that is going to go to about 2.5%. Great news. We need to be around 8%, ladies and gentlemen, of GDP, you know, 8%, because we are 1.35 billion people and health is a right. Just like it's your right of freedom of speech and right to have oxygen when you go out, health is a right. Consecutive governments from the time we got independence from British, health was always considered okay. If you have a few medical colleges, government colleges will take care of it. And we started the first budget, we spent 0.1% of GDP on health, ladies and gentlemen. First budget when the British left. To now we are at 1.2 and we're now moving to 2.5. Still below where we need to be, but relatively doing okay. This government has increased it. So I'm hoping that with this sudden, in fact, the health is the largest area of spending change in the new budget, right? Largest area of spending change, 137% increase is health because we saw what health could do. If we didn't do the lockdown in a timely fashion, and if we didn't handle it the way we did, and if we didn't get lucky with a lighter strain compared to the West and better weather compared to the West, we would have lost millions of our brothers and sisters. COVID has been a wake up call for each one of us, as well as the national conscience has been woken up. Health spending will improve, which means youngsters who are sitting on this line who want to use a tech platform to enable health or do a life sciences company or a biotech company will get to gain over the next 5 years because government itself can become a big customer for a device. So if I crack it, if I come out with a cheap digital X-ray or a digital device that can measure a viral load on a patient easily, I can sell into public health. Today I cannot because there's not enough money. So winds of change, ladies and gentlemen, and highly encouraging for those of you. You don't need to be a biologist, but you can still solve problems in healthcare because of the convergence of engineering, data, and biology. Welcome to the triangle of opportunity.
For sure. I mean, again, that is a very vivid description of the opportunity that lies ahead of us. And I'm sure a lot of people listening, including myself, will get motivated to take steps in the right direction, owing to the great work that you are doing and the others in the ecosystem, which actually motivates us to address the problems especially after we've seen it firsthand affect all of us. So kudos to that. And I want to take a step back now and move to Bugworks with that context itself, right? You are solving a problem which is almost unsolvable in the traditional sense of it, right? And as a founder, as much as you want to be courageous, bold, belief oriented towards that longer vision, I'm sure it's very personal, at least when the journey is starting, right? So, what I'm trying to now add is that let's take a step back to 10, 12 years back, right? When you were starting off, how with Cellworks and this side of the journey, how did you exactly make sure that you could attract the right people with the right circumstances and make sure that your belief is empowering them as well so that they can look at it
Yeah.
from the same, if not same, similar lens, or and work towards the higher vision, because I'm sure at the start success, money, all of the tangible things are not a motivational factor. That's only a byproduct of if things go right, which is a big if.
Yeah.
So how do
Big
you
if.
manage that initially is something that I would love to know, especially from the viewpoint of a founder. Like, what were your personal struggles, if you could perhaps explain, if
Sure.
there were any,
Fantastic.
and how did you manage to attract great talent as you spoken about? Because I'm sure I know of this because you have a great opinion of the India talent pool, which is again a reinforcement mechanism for all of us listening. So I'd love your opinion there.
Sure. Multiple questions, and I'll try to layer it. Huge challenges in doing a life sciences biotech. It's the hardest area to do a startup, Jivraj. And those challenges and learnings, the composite of those challenges and learnings define an extraordinary journey for me. In my thing, if you say, Anand, have you had an extraordinary life? I would say, yes, I'm living the dream. What dream? The dream of trying to do something that is was considered unimaginable, unsolvable, working with a group of people, learning at every way from everyone around me, working with people who are 100 times smarter than me, who yet consider me as a par with them, the colleagues. So all those learnings, challenges, trials, and tribulations, the composite of that is the word extraordinary. So when I started Cellworks, ladies and gentlemen, think about this. I'm an engineering guy, got together with some folks in Bangalore who are all Bay Area people and said, guys, can we use engineering to solve some problem in medicine? We started with naive thought process like that, right? And then one thing led to the other. We met an oncologist and said, wow, can we do this? And then I kept my antennas open while I was still working the previous job to say, how can I use modeling and simulation to solve problems in biology? And when you keep on thinking about things, you start reading, you talk to people, don't be afraid to ask the dumbest questions. Even today, this morning before the call with you, Jivraj, I was talking to my lead chemist. I know nothing about chemistry after 12th standard chemistry. And I was asking him the most basic questions of organic chemistry because I'm never bashful to learn. It's the most important thing. And when your team around you knows that you're not BSing, you're humble about the fact what you know, and you're humble about the fact what you don't know, that's great. So then everybody is in that modality of nobody is trying to outwit each other. We're all going to learn, we're going to make mistakes, move on. So I became the person who could put the vision for Cellworks and for Bugworks. And then the job of the CEO is not chief executive officer, is chief ecosystem officer. The word E is for ecosystem. And you become the evangelist, E for evangelism, E for ecosystem. Leave the execution to people who are far more talented than me, but maybe they couldn't do what I could do in terms of saying, we are going to solve cancer problem because a single drug will not work for every breast cancer patient, or a single drug doesn't work for all pancreatic patients. The genomic background of the patient could change the outcome. So can we use the genomic background and do modeling and simulation studies that allows the oncologist to change medicines for it? Somebody had to believe in myself. So I kept sharpening that messaging, because it can't be BS. People read through BS in 5 seconds. Nowadays it's 3 seconds. They read through BS. So you sharpen the vision, and then you tell yourself, I'm going to evangelize this cause for the next 7 to 10 years. You tell yourself, you say, my job, Anand, your job is A, to learn something you know nothing about, hire the best people and learn from them, leave them to do their work without being their boss. That's all old fashioned nonsense. Three is evangelize that area. And four is I always have a major, huge white sheet in my office where I draw the ecosystem, Jivraj. Most people miss that. If you're going to solve a problem, if there's somebody in the line listening today who says, I'm going to create a piece of software that allows diabetic people to read their blood and see how their sugar is changing, right? I will take a big white sheet and draw the entire ecosystem of people in India that are working in diabetes. Laboratories, R&D companies, hospitals, key opinion leaders in diabetics, who are the devices companies like AcuCheck that are working in diabetics. I'm giving you a specific example on my mindset, right? And then you say, for my company to do well, how many people in this ecosystem can I connect? And that success in biological sciences is defined by how many people in that ecosystem are talking about you. Consider your company doing good work. How many of them you're trying to go and collaborate, etc. We did that for Cellworks, and I think we did a much better job for Bugworks. What we did with Bugworks, we changed the game completely and said, I don't want to create a big company with 200 employees. 25 employees, outstanding in what they do in inventing new antibiotics, only with their mind, outsource everything else. So now if you come into Bugworks, we're 25 people, but we work with 8 countries. We work with 20 suppliers, and we have a dozen key opinion leaders all over the world. So if somebody comes and says, Anand, you're doing a good job, I'm not doing a good job. It's this ecosystem that you're getting your company plugged into that is pulling your company up. I always ask young startups, who is talking about you? Which key opinion leader is saying that what you're doing is good, right? That is so very, very important. So the mindset has become that you need those energies and passion to carry your company for 7 to 10 years. That's your biggest talent, and that is your job number one for a CEO. It's not execution, it's evangelism, right? Get a good team, get out of their way, let them execute. I spend all my time outside Bugworks, connecting Bugworks into this globe. So it takes a village to do something. It takes the globe to create a new antibiotic that has not been done in 50 years, Jivraj. It takes the world. So think global, act global, but always be proud of your localization.
For sure. Again, so many different factors that have gone into the success of Bugworks that you mentioned. And I see such a large part of perseverance in that journey and the passion, which is so evident through your words as well. It's absolutely spectacular. I want to take a deep dive into a couple of things that you mentioned, right? And I'll start with, let's say, the partnerships and the grants and the funding, right? Because I know for a fact, and as you mentioned briefly, that you've done a great job at that in the manner that has enabled you to be able to do the things that you want to, because I think Bugworks is one of the only companies to have received at least from the Southeast Asia spectrum, to have received funding from the US government. And there have been so many different things you've done, right? And you mentioned it, like we were talking before the podcast, as to how I remember one of your quotes, right? Take every meeting, right? And how important that is, because I felt that is what encouraged me to perhaps text you as well and maybe take my leap of faith, because I felt that you would be giving. And that is what exactly turned out to happen. But in the context of being a founder, right? How important are patience and perseverance as virtues, especially when connecting to brands which may seem out of your reach, but in actuality may actually pave your way to success?
Beautiful question. Uh, Boys and girls who are listening to this is the most important question. I tell you what, don't do a startup for the sake of startup. I already said that because that's so boring. Then I will just sound like an old man giving gyan, and I hate giving gyan.
For sure.
But if you're trying to do any startup that's solving any problem, right? A social problem, a health problem, a food problem, environment problem. As I said, right? Make a change to a small patch of grass. That's a good thing, right? In this life. You need that patience and perseverance, because if you're motivated by things other than that goal, you will be derailed. You're dead on arrival, right? You might as well then go build an app. And if you're successful, the app make millions, good for you. Enjoy your life. Nothing wrong with that. But to want to do things on this side, where the biological sciences take 7 to 10 years, you need evangelism, you need patience, you need people who bet on you, and they only can bet on your perseverance because they don't know if you're going to be successful. Even now, we don't know whether Bugworks assets will finally be successful and become a drug that saves a life in Chhattisgarh or in London, right? But somebody believes that this chap is serious about what, just man or woman. is really serious about what they want. And that white sheet of paper, which I still keep with me, Jivraj, is the key. I drew everything. I said, which are the governments that are investing in antibiotics? Which are the grant bodies in the world that are working in my space? Who are the best key opinion leaders? Who are the doctors? Who are the hospitals? Who are the labs? You need to just start cold calling, talking to people in your network. I think age helped. They didn't slap me because I was already in my late 40s when I started Bugworks. Maybe age became success. The same investors who turned me down saying that I was too old today call us back and say, you know what? To do the type of work you are doing, probably it's okay to be balding and gray and have years of experience. As long as you have will and you have energy to do what you want, age is just a number. So this evangelism is so key, and you have to feel, leave all your shame aside and reach out to all pockets. Write to Mukesh Ambani. Most likely you won't get an answer. Write to Ratan Tata. You may not get that. It's okay. I went and met Ratan Tata. We met Dilip Sangvi, Mr. Narayan Murthy, Nandan Nilakeni, Chris Gopalkrishnan, Kiran Mazumdar, who's a investor in our company, etc. You have to be shameless, particularly if you want to do things that are not just in tech app oriented but are game changers. It's not going to happen easily because investors don't naturally come into game changing innovation in India yet. In your generation, that's going to change. The 2.0, I spoke to you before we started our interview, Jivraj. The 2.0 are youngsters like you doing things that I would have never imagined at your age, and are investors also betting in the Jivrajas of the world. That's the 2.0. And the convergence of engineering, data, and biology. All that's the 2.0. So back to the important question that you said, the ability to make cold calls, connect with people, then say I need somebody who's very good in grants. Talk to everybody in Department of Biotechnology who may answer you or not answer you. Say, how do I write grants? You start from there from scratch. And that is that notebook or white sheet that you write in, and you say, I am sitting in this ecosystem. And then you say, after 5 years, when somebody says which are the top 10 companies in that space in India or in the world, I want Bugworks name to come in there. Why? Not because I'm going to get any brownie points, because the value or valuation of your company is directly based on what the ecosystem thinks about your company, not what you think about your company. The valuation or the perceived value of your company depends on what the composite ecosystem thinks and talks about your company, not the BS that you may yourself drink. As they say, you drink your own Kool-Aid, right? So it's very important that you associate with good people who are very critical, who tear up your science, your technology, ask tough questions. That is so very, very important. And I've never missed a meeting, however small, whether it's in Cafe Coffee Day or in the Leela Palace, which is one of the largest hotels in Bangalore. Never missed it. And I want to retell your audience something I said. Our very first investor happened on a meeting I wanted to cancel. Guys, the very first investor, Baxter Ventures from Chicago, was visiting Biocon, which is India's largest biotech company. And Biocon invited Bugworks, this is in 2016, saying this is a small company doing good work. You should meet the head of Baxter. I went grumblingly, and Jivraj, you may have heard the story before, but for your audience, because there was traffic. And I said, what is Baxter going to do with me? Waste of time. Finally, they loved the pitch. They said this company could be game changing, and they put the first $1.5 million in us. That $1.5 million, most important seed money, has allowed us to get to where we are today. Not just that 1.5 in terms of quanta, but in terms of the impact it had when it came. So never miss a meeting. And our biggest investor, University of Tokyo Edge Capital Japan, happened because I went to give a talk at the Leela Palace as part of new companies emerging in Bangalore. Bunch of Japanese people in there. Again, I told myself, now how are they going to understand what I'm doing? But went through it. And that same perseverance, that same patience, that same visioning, missioning, nervous energy, evangelizational energy needs to come out in every one of your pitches. Less number of slides, ooze with more passion. And we got a Japanese investor, right? So our survival happened because of networking ecosystem. Nobody put money into a company just because the science was good. They almost assumed the science was good because so good people come together. US government has given us awards. Science must be good. But can this company make it? Do they have the oomph? Do they have the dill in the right place? To go for the next 10 years to break such a big problem. These are the lessons. for the youngsters who are listening here.
For sure. And I think the perseverance is so evident. And I must mention that, another thing that you mentioned with that story in the last time around when I heard you was that you took 200 times, 200 pitches to actually crack your first deal. And I know you'd be modest enough to not mention it, but everybody who's listening, like this is absolutely inspirational. And more than inspirational, so pivotal in understanding that it will take time, but as long as we believe and we want to make it happen, we'll figure out a way.
I just want to tell your audience, right? It's very strange. I must share with all of you youngsters is if you ask me today, if there was a much easier way to do Bugworks, would you have taken it? I'd be very honest with you. The answer is no. It's so spectacular and so exhilarating because it's so tough. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, the ultimate goal of what you're doing is not that one day you're going to get a check and you're going to become happy. It's those bits and pieces and small inflections and trials and tribulations that you go through. That that composite, the cumulative experience of that is what you're going to say is fantastic. Great. If you get a payday and you get a 5 crores in your bank, I'm happy for you, super happy for you. But that will be one in the tick box. It won't be the tick box. It's
Right.
one in a group of tick box, right? So all the challenges we have. The first day we found out that our compound is killing a superbug that is otherwise swimming happily. When you put all the other antibiotics, this damn thing is swimming, and our staff was able to kill it. $1 billion can't give us the satisfaction. We said, Eureka! From India to discover a new compound that can save people from pneumonia, from blood infections, from stomach infections. Wow, wow, wow. Those wow factors and those eureka moments are phenomenal. That's what makes this journey so exhilarating.
For sure, for sure. And it is, as you said, not those 30 seconds of joy that is the result. It's the journey that makes it so fulfilling. And that's again
Absolutely
a
right.
beautiful cue there. I want to take one last stab at, your Bugworks journey before we go into the concluding segments. But I
Sure.
again know for a fact that you have some really good pointers in terms of what it means to be a true leader, right? Because I've seen you often articulate so carefully in terms of being careful enough to mention the team, give due credit where required, mention the investors and mention what you're going to do for them in terms of the return on investment, because that's not money that you can take for granted. And all of that you do when you put somebody else and all of the stakeholders ahead of you when you mention them. So, in the context of leadership and putting everybody else ahead of you, I'd love if you could tell our audience a couple of pointers from your experience in terms of leadership.
Sure. Sure. So I have not gone to an MBA school. I don't know all these fancy terms. I'm certainly not a guru. But I believe that if you're so passionate about what you want to do and you work your butt off to learn what you don't know, a good team, you put a good team together and get the hell out of their way. This hierarchy concept of you're a CEO, you're a CSO, CTO is a bunch of BS that never works in a startup. You need some hierarchy so not everybody can take all decisions because that would be cacophony. But flat structures, hiring good people. And I always, this is my fifth company, and every company that I've been associated with, the founding team does not have people of the same background. Because then you make the same mistakes. You have the same intelligences, but you also have the same mistakes. So you need one person who is an execution person, you need one dreamer, and you need one networker. So it's like a DEN, DEN. You dream, you need execution, you need networking. So they're orthogonal, right? You dream, you execute. So you need a chief dreamer, you need a chief execution person, and you need a chief ecosystem or networker. Think about that composition of team. Two, treat people with the utmost love and respect. And don't think of it that is a mid-50s man trying to give you gyan. Like I said, I hate gyan, right? When you treat people with utmost respect and not false respect, with real respect, I find that they give a 200% of their natural potential, right? So it's actually a win-win. By doing so, I'm finding a team that works its tail off and does so towards a common goal. Number three, every employee co-founder of mine has a whole bunch of shares. I own only 11% of the company as of today in Bugworks. I'll put it on record. So it's like because Because I always tell founders who say, I want to be majority owner, 100% of zero, Jivraj, equals what?
Yeah,
Zero. 1% of a billion is a lot of money.
for sure.
10% of 10 million is a lot of money. 100% of zero equals zero. Don't think of the old way of I'm a majority owner. All those things are gone.
Yeah.
Bring good founders together, share the equity with everyone. And I found that this model works because suddenly all 25 people in the company are co-founders.
Yeah.
They don't need to hear Anand Kumar's Gyan and vision. They know our vision is we are going to save millions of people. We are innovating a new antibiotic. This has never been done for 50 years. Think the impossible, do the impossible. Everybody, that becomes the DNA of the company. So, what you believe should become the DNA of the company, not just yours, right? And the last point is when you treat people with so much of respect and love, you get the best. People don't take advantage of you. There is an old thought process in India that says, hey, be careful. If you're too nice guy, they're going to take advantage of you. I don't believe in it. It has always worked in my favor. Treat your co-employees as co-founders. I told you that, right? And then it becomes not 1% company, it becomes 50% co-founder company. Give everybody shares. And all stakeholders have to be respected. Your employees, your collaborators, your suppliers. Even if you're buying a piece of, buying a pencil from someone and they have a 30-day payment, respect it. Guess what? When COVID hits and I can't afford to pay that person, they say, sir, don't worry, you're one of our best customers. 6 months credit, right? And four, when you do such things, there's an important concept called alchemy that will come and surround you. When you have a mission and a vision and a goal, it's awesome, Jivraj, that you will suddenly see that energies and people and stakeholders align themselves towards your goal, right? It sounds like the book Secret. For those of you who have heard of the book and movie called Secret, right? It's so true, man. As Hollywoodish as it sounds, if you have a good, clean goal and you go after it, things align. And the final point is the most important thing that I look in a co-founder or a partner or a vendor or my employees is ethics. Because that's the only thing that's black and white. Work is subjective, output is subjective, all that is subjective, but ethics, you have to be totally non-compromising. Then if your founding team, your accounting team, your engineering team, everybody keeps that high level of ethics, guess what? The data that you produce is gold. Valuation of your company will go up. The best people from around the world want to be associated with you because they don't think you're some jugad company out of Bhopal or from Chennai, right? That jugadism is gone. Your generation can make that happen.
For sure. Again, like I love all of the things that you mentioned and are extremely pivotal in making a true organization and institution happen as opposed to just a money making machine, which will fall short of the process because the process matters, people matter, the people are the
Absolutely.
product eventually. And if you don't respect your team, you're not going to make much of out of it anyway. So beautiful
So right.
pointers there. And, with that, let's take, a stab at, the concludatory segments. I wanted to ask you a couple of things in regards to a lot of the pointers that you had mentioned, but due to, let's say, due to the, let's not extend because of the sake of it, and I'll bunch it in, let's say, a, bracket where I talk about your belief system, and it'd be very helpful to understand because I know, like, so I quoted Vinod Khosla before on the show as well. And he talks about the importance of belief systems, right? Because you need to have things that you truly believe in, and only then can you empower people around you or actually represent those beliefs, right? And you've spoken about the pursuit of excellence, you've spoken about value addition, impact, you're a philanthropist, advisor, so many hats you've worn throughout the course of your career, and you are a dreamer still. Because I remember in the talk that you gave at Berkeley, you mentioned that you want to do something in terms of, the carbon, the environment, and the carbon emissions that happen. So what I'm trying to basically understand now is that as Anand, not the co-founder of Bugworks, but as Anand, the person, what are some of the core beliefs that drive your life that make you so passionate, energetic, and make sure those are the principles that you live by?
Excellent. I think this pulls it all together. You know, often I sit back and think about generations before me, Jivraj, and I say, If I could go to a good school like Don Bosco, Anna University, and then go to study abroad, many generations before me toiled to get me to this point. So I can't take any credit, right? My teachers, my parents, their parents, their parents, their parents say, holy cow, I came from a very poor family. My grandfather was an orphan, agriculture background, whatever. So many people must have worked and their energies have colluded together to create an opportunity for me. How thankful I am. So that gratitude that so many people before me and along with me have brought me to this point makes me very humble, because then I realize it's not because I'm somehow great or I studied well, I worked hard, right? And therefore, A, B, we're born in a country like India, which is such a dynamic country with the oldest heritage in history that was destroyed through colonialism, and now we're 75 years old. Then I say, wow, we're 75 years old, young, 75 years young. Opportunity to give back to the country I was born and where my forefathers were born. Three, 300 million people go to sleep with an empty stomach. How can I say we are a developed country, right? How can I? So there is huge inequality. So I look at that inequality. I look at my privileged past. I look at my privileged present, very comfortable, beautiful life I have. I could just have the beautiful life and just die and go away. And then I said, my belief system is you have to give back. And my father, being a great doctor, inculcated us, and his parting numbers to me were as follows, Jivraj. I wanted to give up Bugworks when I went to meet my father before he died, because no funding was coming, tough problems scientifically. And then he told me, Anand, I spent 53 years and I must have saved 3 lakh people, maybe 2.5 to 3 lakh people. If you crack this, you can impact millions of people year after year, even after you die, right? And measure your success by the number of lives you've impacted. That became enshrined as a value for me now. So if you say, Anand, now you're 55, 56, how are you going to measure your success for the rest of the life? That success definition is the work I do, my mission, my vision, the ecosystem I'm associated with. How many lives can I positively impact before I'm gone? The next belief system is what you leave behind for my children, etc., is not just bank balance, is goodwill, societal goodwill. If you do good work, you make money for your stakeholders, have a good life. But many people should say, Jivraj, I heard you, man, and you made a difference. I went and did this thing because after I heard your podcast, or I said, if a 22-year-old can feel this level of passion, I'm ashamed I don't have that level of passion. I need to be like Jivraj. Let us, each one of us can become an evangelist for this country, right? Why did Abdul Kalam? Why is Abdul Kalam the most famous president? He had no political background, nothing, right? Yes, he worked very hard and came through the hard ranks of being India's spaceman, because he connected with people and he constantly told people, give back to India, do things that impact other people's life. Now we all talk, he's long gone. We never talk about his bank balance. We only say, man, Abdul Kalam made a big difference because he bootstrapped an entire generation. So I want my work, my mission, my message, the success of that is going to be defined by how many other startups are going to be motivated by our work to want to make a difference in society. How many people are going to say, I need to have my antennas on to understand what truly drives me and do it sooner than later, right? These are the belief systems. As I said, the ethics is uncompromising. Even if I get the gold medalist from IIT, if she or he doesn't have ethics, I don't give a rat's ass about having that person, because I don't trust the person, right? Ethics, want to give back, take everybody along with you. Because when you have a group going together, you can scale much higher mountains. And remember, a startup journey is like climbing Everest with little to no oxygen, right? So it takes your perseverance, because there you can't fake it. Once you hit base camp and start moving up, if you're a faker, you're done. You're going to be running down or you'll drop dead like a fly. So think about it saying, holy cow, what is Anand saying? I need to go up to Everest and no oxygen tank. So you will learn how to go on very parsimonious oxygen. You'll say, no, reaching that summit is everything for me. I'm going to put everything at it. And you need people along with you because you can't go alone. And how thankful you'll be when you come down to base camp to say, if that Sherpa was not there to make the cup of tea for me, I couldn't have gone up. If the Sherpa was not there to carry my belongings and I came down, I would have been dead and I've been an icicle by now. Every Sherpa every Sherpa makes your life. And it's that number of people who come with you who made your life. That's why you need to give back, because you are not a superstar. You're just one, and get the whole ecosystem going. And people make fun of investors in our country. Don't. Remember, it's not your money, it's investor money. He or she is a very important stakeholder. I have to be ethical with them, I have to be honest with them. I want them to succeed. Only then they'll invest in the next Bugworks in India. And the next generation can be invested, because it's not about me and my company alone. If we screw up, people think Indian biotech ecosystem is pathetic. If we succeed, an entire ecosystem succeeds. So, all of you, ladies and gentlemen, your success is not about your company success alone. It will create a success story for India, and then you will tell your children, "I put a small brick in India's glorious wall of fame. That one brick hiding in there is the brick I put." So we are all bricklayers.
For sure. Brilliant. Like I think I will fall short of adjectives to put this narrative into an explanation, but this has been so wonderful. And I cannot begin to thank you for your time here. But, at the expense of a rather stereotypical end and putting you on the hotspot, I would love for you to perhaps, leave us with that one parting thought to a 20-year-old Anand, right? So if the room is full of thousands of Anands, what would you tell that 20-year-old self as an advice before we leave? But I must
Sure.
mention this has been spectacular, Anand. Like, this has been such a privilege and
Jivraj,
honor.
thank you. Jivraj, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And like I said, your questioning, your philosophy belies your age. And I may be your parents' age, but it doesn't matter. When I talk to youngsters like you and your generation, I learn a lot. And I keep myself open for those learnings. So I'm also humbled by the opportunity. I just want to finish up with a parting shot, which I already mentioned early in a chat is, you are the luckiest generation India has seen, the new India has seen. Like I said, 1,000 years ago, maybe there was a generation like you. We don't know. But post colonialism, this is 2.0. You are 2.0. We are all point of that. We are me and my parents and my grandparents are all part of the confused 1.0, coming out of the insecurity of the colonialists, etc. You're a great generation. There is leadership in our country that is revitalizing our country, and you have been given and not an ordinary platform. Like I said, no youngster I meet today is worried about dal chawal, which is amazing, right? And they're not taking up jobs. You're doing startups at your age, where I was trembling in my boots so I could get a paycheck. So I salute you guys, because I didn't have the gumption that you have at your age. But don't lose this opportunity. Look around India. Don't only choose tech companies that have made money, right? Yes, doing another app to have a faster pizza delivery helps somebody. It's not bad, but you have an opportunity to do extraordinary things.
Yes.
You've been given a platform that our country never had. You're defining the 2.0 of our country. Please go off and do extraordinary things, because if we just end up as a rich man or woman, that's not good enough.
For sure, for sure. This is a wonderful parting thought, and I think that leaves the narrative on the exact right basis. This has been so wonderful, and I would like to take this opportunity again to thank you for your time today. Thank you so much, Anand.
Thank you
It's
so
been
much,
wonderful.
Jivraj. I learned a lot from our interaction, and I wish every one of your listeners all the very best. 2.0 is going to rock. Thank you so much.
For sure.
Wow, wow, wow. Wasn't that spectacular? I absolutely cherished the episode bit by bit, almost every minute of it. And I hope you did too. If you did, do not forget to subscribe to the channel for one such episode every week, as I continue to host some amazing minds from the Indian startup ecosystem. I am always ready to take feedback and always up for a chat, so feel free to ping me up and do not forget to turn the bell icon. Thank you so much for your time. I will see you next week for another episode. Till then, I hope you recall, if you never try, you'll never know. Stay tuned and keep building.